Okay, hi everybody. I was just looking over old live pictures and I realized that I always seem to choose to wear red for a live, and I'm trying to figure out what that says about my psyche. Anyway, I'm hoping you guys can see me and pick me up, and it's begun. It's 3 o'clock by my clock, so that means it's time. Hi, Sally. Yes, we have viewers. All is good. So, guess what I did this time? I actually came up with a plan of things I could say. Isn't that amazing? I also have a clock staring at me, so I don't have to keep asking you guys what time it is. So, oh, thank you for the compliments. Yes, I like red a lot. I figure as a brunette with pale skin that it's one of my colors. I could be wrong. Anyhow, hello everyone. So, this is my happy 2018 New Year Facebook Live. It's a little late. It's all my fault. Well, technically speaking, it's not really my fault because certain persons got sick in my household and then I got sick. So I couldn't do the live that I had intended to do in January because I was busy hacking up a lung, but all is well. It was actually a really nice vacation, an enforced vacation, and a bit of a brain break. So it all came out fine in the end. Yeah, we should have, so I've got some new internet here in the office, and it is the weekend, so no one is around, so we should have a really good reception, and hopefully you can hear me really well and there shouldn't be any lag times at all. Thanks for saying hi, everybody. I always love knowing where everyone is tuning in from, so if you'd like to leave a comment and tell me, that always makes me feel, I don't know, so glamorous and global or something. It's always really fun to kind of know that I'm reaching so many people all over the place. So, 2018, let's get tucked in right away. Here's my plan. I will talk at you for a little while everyone figures out that it's 3 o'clock, at least on my time zone, and tunes in. And then you guys can ask me questions in a little bit. That way I don't have to repeat the same answers to the same questions. And also I have some ideas about the kind of things that you're interested in. So I figure I will start with those. Right. So the very first and most important thing is that the cover of Competence was announced, and there she is. So this is the third book in the Custard Protocol series. There will be one more book in this series, so it's going to be 4. This is number 3. This one is going to be out July 17th, and I'll be launching it at Tattered Cover in Denver. So those of you from Colorado, maybe I will see some of you there. Tattered Cover is old stomping grounds for me. I've done a couple of events there, so yeah. So there she is. My current blog post on my website talks about how the cover came to be and some interesting things that are going on with this cover, which I'll be happy to talk about later, maybe if you're interested. Yeah, so this is Primrose's book. So this is Primrose on the cover. Ooh, stop that. And there she is. She got her primrose colored parasol, which makes me very happy. And the background might be familiar to some of you Globetrotters out there. It is a place that is actually visited in the book. I did not get this cover in time to put her outfit in the book. Sometimes I try to do that. Often I'll try to do that. I'll actually try to write the color of the dress into the novel, but I didn't have an opportunity to do that with this one. So she never actually wears Kelly Green, although I guess it probably wouldn't have been called Kelly Green in 1896, 95. But, hello, Dick. Oh my gosh, everybody's tuning in. Anyway, so that's the biggest, most exciting news recently. I'm pretty excited by this cover. It's very daring, with those greens and those teals. And here's my biggest problem. You know, it's a serious problem, which is I almost always try to like dress to match the cover, and I really don't own a lot in those colors. So it's kind of a good thing I'm not doing a big book tour for this book, because I wouldn't be able to dress to match the cover every day of the tour. So fortunately, I'm just doing the one launch. Don't you worry, I will probably also do a Facebook Live maybe the week after, week and a bit. So you can ask me, we'll do a spoiler and a couple of other things, and then you guys can ask me lots of questions over on the spoiler group if you would like to. And then I will talk a little bit about the launch of this book, but that's in July. That's a ways away. So that is the big news. I have lots of other like exciting things to talk about. Let me see. What else do I have? So Competence comes out in July. Before Competence, I'm releasing How to Marry a Werewolf in 10 Easy Steps. That is Channing's book. So yeah, hotly anticipated. Channing is finally getting his comeuppance in the form of a very, how do I put this? A very pragmatic, brash American young lady. So I hope you guys will like her. Her name is Faith. And yes, she travels across the Atlantic, seeking revenge on werewolves. She wants to marry one for revenge. And so she meets Channing. So yes, that's exciting. That's How to Marry a Werewolf. That's going to come out at the beginning of May. So you'll get that one in the spring. Now, it is technically in world chronology set after Competence. So, but it doesn't spoil anything in Competence. That's just the way it falls out. But it's going to come out before Competence, just because that's where it fits into my release schedule, frankly. So I can't put too many books releasing all together. I go crazy, and I'm not supposed to. So, so you get How to Marry a Werewolf. That's Channing's book. That'll be in May. And then Competence will come out in July. And then I'm going to release the second San Andreas Shifter book. And that's the Sumage Solution was the first one. The second one is the Omega Conundrum. And that'll be my November release. For those of you who are on top of me for what my release schedule looks like, you may or may not have noticed that for the past maybe 5 or 6 years, I've always released a book in early November. And I'm going to try and keep doing that. My young adult series started me off on that trajectory, and it just kind of is a comfortable time of year to release. So there it is, you guys. You get 3 books from me this year, 1 novella, 2 novels. So that's a lot of Gail Carriger for you. But I think you could keep up. Yes. So those are my releases, 2018. I hope you guys are all ruminating on very urgent questions for me, but keep ruminating. Don't ask them yet. So what you're probably wondering then is why I'm doing Channing's book in May, and that's just because I have to get it's a self-published book, so I have to like hire my own editors, and it's just the timing when they could do it just turned out to be early in the year. So that's why it's the May release. Yeah, and if you want to keep up, so that'll be the next cover art release as well. So if you want to be like kept up to date on what the cover for that book is going to look like, because it's going to be slightly different. It's not going to be quite the same idea as some of my other books. Intentionally, it's a little bit different. So yeah, join the Chirp. That's my only month newsletter. And you will get a sneak peek of what that book cover looks like before everybody else, like everybody did for the Competence cover. Wahaha. Let's see. The other thing to know is that if you are wondering, which you may or may not be wondering, how I decide what I write about next, or what character I write about next, that I sometimes consult you for that. So I will occasionally run a survey and find out what people are interested in reading. So, or who people are interested in reading next. And again, that's almost always done via the Chirp. So if you want to influence the next book to come out, that's how you do that as well. So I may or may not be contemplating one of those surveys in the not too distant future. The other like important thing that's going on in my life right now is I started a podcast. So if the lives are not enough of my dulcet tones, then you can get me in your ears every couple of weeks for 20 minutes or so with my friend Piper, and it's a travel podcast. We are talking about travel hacks, conventions, so not really anything to do with writing, but if you're a frequent traveler or if you're planning on doing any kind of traveling, we have the tips for you. Everything from how to survive hotel food to, lots of, believe me, we are frequent travelers. We are obsessed with how to hack our way into the best means to get from point A to point B. We go in deep on the importance of things like the hard-boiled egg and much, much more. So it's called 20-Minute Delay, and that's the number 20 and then minute delay. And it's on iTunes and everywhere. So if you're into podcasts, that's the thing. I'm loving it so much. It's just something I'm really dorky about. So I like to talk about it. And it's also, like, frankly, kind of nice to talk about and not writing once in a while, much as I love my job. Talking about traveling is pretty fun too. What else is going on? Oh, I'm wearing one of these shirts today. Yay! Ooh, gratuitous boob shot. But yes, that's my outfit, and because everybody always asks about my outfit, so I figure I'll just tell you. And then I have a little cherry turban on, and my vintage glasses that were a gift from one of my readers. So I dressed up for you. My pearls, my good pearls, my weekend pearls. They're fake. I'm really thank you for the shirt thing. Yes, I love my shirt. So with the cameo and the octopus, I'm really enamored of it. This is one of the ones that you can get off my merchandise page. I'm thinking of getting it in a couple of other colors. Ooh, I should see if they have a Kelly green one to match the Competence cover. Right. Sorry. Should make a note. Segue. Okay. So shall we? That was like 13 minutes of like blah. How about some questions? Does anybody have some exciting questions for me? Characters, plans, thoughts, that sort of thing? Yes, I should buy all the colors. I know this is the point in a live where I kind of have to wait while you guys type. And I also have to apologize because the way it works is it sort of scrolls across my screen, so I don't always catch every question. But what I do is this evening when this is over with, I'll go back through and double check. And if I didn't verbally answer your question, I will type you an answer. So I do try to catch everybody's questions. So Donnie would like to know, will I be going to Dragon Con ever? Yes, I was scheduled several years ago and then I had to cancel for surgery. Not like anything serious, but that is why I did not go to Dragon Con. I would love to. Various tracks have contacted me, so I think they would be interested in having me, but I am an author and they don't actually programming for them, authors are not huge draws, so they don't tend to spend money on us, and I'm really daunted by the cost, but also just like knowing which hotel to book, getting a hotel before like they run out. I don't really have any friends in Atlanta who I could stay with, so I would really like to do Dragon Con, but it's a little bit of a logistical nightmare, to be frankly honest with you. So that's why I haven't. It is definitely on my long list, and I do have a core group of really close friends who go, so, you know, I'd have a security blanket in order to survive it, but I'm daunted by that, and it's me. So I am also daunted by the idea of walking. I'd be multiple track, because I write YA, I write steampunk, and I write urban fantasy, so that'd be different tracks. And so I'd be walking between hotels in Atlanta in the middle of summer in stilettos. So I'm also daunted simply by virtue of my fashion choices. So I don't know how the cosplayers do it at Dragon Con, frankly. It seems quite miserable to me. So those are some of my kind of honest to goodness reasons, but it is definitely one that I want to go to because I know, quite apart from everything else, that there's a core group of cosplayers who cosplay my books who often go to Dragon Con, and that's a good enough reason for me. Photo ops. Gillian would like to know if I'm planning on going much beyond 1900 in my books. So probably not. The turn of the century is what you're asking about. I never rule anything out, but I tend to say that when people lose interest in the corset, I lose interest in the time period. So tends to be speaking, yeah. If the culture stops wearing stays, I'm not really as interested in it. And I definitely am not a big fan of anything once the world wars start. They're just really dark and difficult for me emotionally as an author to deal with. So although you can get, maybe you can't get, I refuse to commit to this, a possible thought on what might have occurred, maybe possibly to my universe if you read the San Andreas Shifter series. So I didn't say that. Forget I said anything. Let's see, did I miss any questions here? People are loving the new cover. Thank you. I must say, when I first saw the new cover with that vibrant green and that vibrant teal, I was a little daunted. It is very bold, but I really like it, and people are responding really well to it. So, all right, doesn't look like I've missed any questions so far. So the finishing school girls are getting some sort of follow-ups. It tends to be the side characters from the finishing school books, but of course it's not the book I have with me. But there is a series called the Delightfully Deadly series. It only has one book in it right now. That's Poison or Protect. But that series is going to continue. It's a series of novellas, and it's all the finishing girl schools after finishing school has ended. And there will be more. None of them will star Sophronia. Sorry. There are contractual reasons not to do that, as well as various other things. But she does show up. Don't you worry. She shows up all over the place, obviously, in various forms. She is a spy, after all. But that series will definitely continue. You will get more novellas in the Delightfully Deadly series. I'd held off for a little while because I hadn't been inspired, and I was suddenly inspired recently. So that's probably going to be the novella I write next. Actually, on my next writing agenda is I have to write the last Custard Protocol series book, which is Percy's story. So Percy and a new character are the main characters for that book. So you got Primrose for this one, Percy for the next one, and that'll be the last one in the Custard Protocol, and that's what I'm writing next. I'm about to start outlining it literally in 2 days. So I start the outlining process. So yeah, that just gives you an insight into how traditional publishing works, is that I'm starting to write the next book in that series, and the third one hasn't even come out yet. So, but that's how it works. I need, when the third one is due, is when due to come out for you guys, is when I have to turn in the fourth one to my editor. So exactly a year is how my deadlines work for that series. So that's what I'm writing next. And then after that, I'm pretty sure I'll be writing the next Delightfully Deadly novella. So, and that's your next finishing school tie-in. Oh, bunch of questions now, guys. Natalie is happy with the model for Competence. I should probably get it back out again, but I don't know where I put my iPad. Yeah, I got to help pick the model for that cover, which always makes me happy, and always makes me think that it looks more like the character I described. Although I should say that Primrose is not a redhead, but I don't mind if she's depicted as one. It's cool. Katarina is going to RWA for the first time in July and wants to know if I have any advice. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this, One of the reasons I'm going to be in Denver for the launch of Competence is I'm going to RWA Nationals, which is kind of an authors union sort of thing. It's not really a union, but it's basically, I guess, a club. It's the Romance Writers of America, RWA, and Nationals is our big conference. I joined RWA about 2 years ago. 2.5 years ago, and I've never been to a Nationals. I was a member of SAFWA, which is the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, and I've been to a lot of stuff that's kind of connected to them, like Worldcon and World Fantasy, but I've never been to a romance writers convention like this before. It's a pro convention, so most of the people there are writers, although there are some fans as well. But it is a great thing if you happen to be in Colorado or in the Denver area. If you are a writer and you write anything that's even tangential to romance, there are a lot of awesome panels on sort of education on how to get started, how to write query letters. There are pitches to editors and agents who are there. I have never been. This is my first one, but I'm really, really excited about it. For the last year or so, I've gotten very active and friendly with my local chapter of RWA. And I go to chapter meetings regularly and stuff like that, and I love it. It's a great, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Association to belong to. It's a lot of strong, powerful, smart, business-minded female writers, mostly female. There are a few guys. And I'm really enjoying like getting to know them and being a part of that community. So very excited about RWA. I should say, if it's your first time at a conference, I have a ton of like quick tip blog posts on going to your first convention. So I have a resources page on my website. You can go check there. It'll say conventions. There's a section for new writers on the resources page, and in that are like my top 10 tips for going to a convention for the first time and that sort of thing. How RWA will be different from other conventions, I'm not really sure. It's my first time too. So far as I can tell, it is very panel heavy, so panels are very popular, educational panels and stuff like that. I will be doing a panel there myself. So that'll be listed on my event schedule as soon as I have all the details of time and day and everything. But I imagine that, Katrina, that you will have a really, really good time there. I think it's going to be a great event. Oliver wants to know if I've considered branching into diesel punk. This is a little bit like the 1900s. Do I continue the Parasolverse past the turn of the century? And then the same answer applies, which is, are there corsets? Then Gail is interested. Are there no corsets? Then Gail is not interested. So, basically, yeah. I like diesel punk very much, but it tends to be set in and around World War II, and or sometimes World War I. But and those are just not periods of history that particularly interest me. So I don't write them. Wahaha. Emma wants to know if I get writer's block and how I get over it. I don't. Somebody more famous than me once, and more clever, once said that writer's block was dreamed up by strange individuals in California like avocado toast. I've just decided that I don't believe in writer's block, therefore it doesn't apply to me. I never suffer from a lack of ideas. In fact, you could say that I suffer from too many ideas all at once. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, I got hijacked by a crazy sci-fi idea last weekend. Oh, suddenly had to write 20,000 words on something that is completely irrelevant to my life, but I had to write it because it was a crazy idea. My biggest thing my tip for writer's block, I guess, if anything, is read some nonfiction. So if you're a sci-fi writer, pick up Scientific America, something like that. If you're writing historical, then pick up a primary source historical piece and just start reading that and see if that helps spur some ideas on. The other thing, there's also 2 tips that I give always, constantly, regardless of everything else. The first one is, as a writer, give yourself permission to suck. Really, that's from Mur Lafferty. I devoutly believe in it. Everybody's first draft sucks. Everybody's. So give yourself permission to suck. Don't be a perfectionist, especially not on the first draft. Just write it and you can always fix it later. That's the secret. The other secret is no one else has to read that first draft. You can make it pretty later. But the idea is just to get the words on the page. And then the other thing is I give you, and you should give yourself, permission to write non-linearly. So if you're writing a book and you're stuck because you don't know exactly what comes next, or you know you have to write the fight scene next and you're just not feeling it, you can skip that bit. I know, it's very exciting. You can skip it and write whatever you really do want to write. That's a couple scenes down the way. You can write the ending if you want to write the ending. And then you can go back and fill it in later. It's okay. Although I will say that I occasionally, future Gail will curse past Gail because past Gail has skipped all the difficult bits. And future Gail has to go back and finally fit them all in during the editing process. So don't do it too much. But if you're really hard up, then just do anything, pretty much do anything that helps you put the words on the page. I think most writers, there are some exceptions, but most of us suffer, the hardest part for us is just the act of putting the words down on the page initially. And you can do it. Just, it's like, you know, you can get them out. You can always fix it later and make it pretty. Casey wants to see a series of short stories on the turning of all the different characters. Ooh, what an interesting idea. The points when, like, Lord Akaldama was made into a vampire, that kind of thing. That would be really, really fun. It might even be flash pieces. What a great idea. That's a great idea. I should write it down. I don't have a pen, but I'll remember. No plans, but I really like the idea. Jessica says she's been looking forward to Channing, Primrose, the new San Andreas story. Thank you. Those are the 3 that are coming out. And then Jessica says something about even if I can't tell, but Facebook Live is dumb and only shows me 3 lines of text. So I don't know if you had a question in there, Jessica, but if you could just retype the question, that would be great. Sunshine wants to know what mic I use for my podcast. I use, you know what? That's also on my resources page. But I have a little fuzzy baby mic thing that I plug into my iPad, actually. And it's a very good, like, it works really well. The audio quality on the podcast is excellent. Piper and I also record separate tracks. They're then put back together, so we're not recording over Skype or anything like that. So the sound quality is very good. We're not really audiophiles, but we're both podcast consumers because we both travel so much. And that means we were very vested going in on making sure that our sound quality is incredibly high. The same guy who produces my audiobooks actually edits our podcast. So it's very, like, high quality audio. Natalie wants to know if I've ever thought about going back in time before the 1850s. And still in a course of people like Rococo, perhaps, or something. Yes, I would love to do that. As with most of my books, and I realized this a little while ago, that I tend to wait to write a story until I have what I call the epiphany moment, or the moment of clarity, which is I start to see a scene with the characters for that story very vividly in my head. And I just need that one scene to spark it. It's not always the first scene. I've talked about this with Soulless quite a bit. The first scene I ever saw in my head with that book was actually the one where Alexia and Ivy, this is the opening to the 2nd chapter, Alexia and Ivy are walking together in Hyde Park with, holding their parasols and talking about the fact that Alexia accidentally killed a vampire the night before. And that was the first scene I ever saw for the whole universe. It's not the first scene in the book, but it's the first scene I saw. And so I always wait for those little ping moments before I write a book. So if I get a ping of, like, I don't know, Lord Akaldama or Lord Akaldama interfering in somebody's life in the Rococo era or something like that, that's when I will write it. But I haven't had that ping, but I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule out, I mean, there are non-corset time periods that I wouldn't rule out in the way past. I love ancient history very much. I'm very passionate about ancient Greek and Roman history in particular, but also other parts of the world, Etruscan, for example. And that leaks into my books quite a bit. but I would love to write what essentially is clock punk or early clock punk. But I just haven't never been struck by a character, and I'm definitely a character driven author, so I need that character before I can get moving, I guess. Marissa asks, does this mean there's a possibility of Regency era Lord A versus Mr. Darcy, or Beau Brummel? Can you imagine? Yes, possibility. I love the Regency era. The How to Marry a Werewolf book owes a great deal to Georgette Hare. Georgette Hare was the first kind of romance author that I really read. Friday's Child was one of my first kind of Regency romance books after Austen, of course. And so How to Marry a Werewolf, although it's set in 1896, actually kind of has a feel of a slightly early in the terms of new romance. So like 90s, early 90s, late 80s Regency. So it has this kind of mannered politeness to it, which also Soulless owes a lot to. And so I feel like How to Marry a Werewolf is the closest to kind of the original voice of Soulless than any of my other novellas have been so far. And I hope you guys like that. But definitely has a Regency overtone, although of course it's not Regency set. But I wouldn't rule out Regency setting. It's a fun historical period to write in. Oh, shoot. Emma wants to know if I have a favorite Austen book. Ooh, man. Okay, so this is one of those things where you're judged. you're always judged on your Austen choices. Right? Because like the true little literati always say persuasion, you know. And then, you know, if you want to be kind of daring and off the beaten track, you say Emma or Northanger Abbey or something. I do like Northanger Abbey because it's Gothic overtones, but I think it is the most challenging to read because she's very immature as an author in Northanger Abbey. And I, honest to goodness, because I am a huge fan of the enemies to lovers romance trope, I do like Pride and Prejudice. And I know that's kind of a cop-out answer because it's sort of everybody's favorite. But I love that trope. I also really love Mansfield Park. Those are kind of my two favorites, because I do like a pining. I mean, I like, Emma has the same thing, only it's the male doing the pining, but Emma has always sort of irritated me a little bit in the spoiled rich girl way as a character. But honestly, truthfully, it's probably Pride and Prejudice. I'm a little embarrassed. I do remember reading Sedition, which is the one that's set in Bath that she didn't finish, or parts of the one that's set in Bath that she didn't finish. I always thought that probably might have been my most favorite Austen, if she ever finished writing it. Because I love Bath as a setting. Maybe I should write a book set in Bath. Sandra wants to know if marine biology and the Simulation Solution are technically in the same universe. If you go back to the beginning of this live, I neatly, or not so neatly, avoided addressing that subject. So the answer to that question is, I can't answer that question, but maybe you'll pick up on clues, and maybe you won't. And that's all I can say. And sometime, you know, if you meet me in person, you could maybe buy me a drink, or catch me when I'm already drunk, and I'll tell you why I can't really talk about it. But there it is. Joshua wants to know if for my self-pub books, is my editing different than my traditional published? So I have a blog post out there. You can Google Gail Carriger, why does that book take so long? And it basically goes through why a book takes so long. And I initially wrote that blog post for trad books because they do take quite a bit longer. But essentially, it's kind of the same timeline squozed for self-published books. So no, for me, the process is very similar. It just tends to be a faster turnaround time because I can kind of squeeze it in. So some of it's on me for turnaround time, but a lot of it is that I'm hiring my editors. So suddenly they're my employees, and they have to tell me exactly how long things are going to take, and they're a little more vested in keeping me as happy as possible. At least I think so. So it just doesn't take it. It's a little bit faster when I can organize. I'm doing the project management essentially for a book production, but for me it is the same. Now it isn't for every independent author, but I really like a heavy edit pass. I always have. I think initially it was because I just didn't really trust my own voice. I've learned to trust myself as a writer a little bit better, but I really like to be edited. I like a really tough, hard, red pen edit. I like to be a little brutalized, because I want it to be as good as possible. And for me, part of that is other people's eyes on my work. Not too many. I don't want the voice to be polluted, but I do want my pacing tested. I really want a professional to tell me what needs to be fixed. So I hire a developmental editor who helps me with the story structure, the pacing, the process, the characters, kind of like the aura of the book and itself, basically the story. That's a developmental editor. And that's the role that my editor with a capital E in my traditional publishing house would take on. But I hire that when I'm indie. And then I also hire a copy editor who does line pass and fixes all of my grammar and spelling and stuff. And then I also hire a proof editor, which is like a second pass on all of that stuff to make sure everything is perfect. So it is an expensive process for me because I insist on hiring all of those people. Then I have 3 to 5 beta readers as well that I try and squeeze in. And those are fans, just like you, who I have selected through the careful process of my various surveys. So little did you know, my crafty ways were always in place. And they're just like super fans who reread my books regularly, who are really invested in making sure that there's character consistency across what is now 20 books or so. And so they read for that. So they'll read to say, Gail, this person has green eyes in the Finishing School series. And suddenly you're writing her with blue eyes. And I'll be like, ugh. So that's what the beta readers are for. And then sometimes I'll also have alpha readers who are old friends who've been reading my books for almost 30 years now. But they have really busy lives, so I don't get to use my alpha readers as much as I used to. And they're kind of squeezed in and out of the process of going through developmental edits and stuff like that. Because what they're checking for is not stuff that my team of editors would catch. Because I really can't expect an editor now to have read every single one of my books because I have so many books in the same universe. So instead, I expect you guys to do it, basically. Occasionally, I will bop onto Facebook and be like, hey, does anybody remember what I did in this book? and you have to help me. Because I have a wiki. The Parasolverse has a Wikipedia, but sometimes even that fails me. And then I have to crowdsource the data because it's a lot to keep in a not very big brain, frankly, you guys. Right. Don't worry about tuning in late. Ask me any questions you have. We merely went over the new book cover. So I guess I don't have any more questions for a little while at the moment. So I am going to talk a little bit about the size of books for a second. Interjected, because this is a question I keep getting and it's really hard to articulate either in print without like a visual element. So I'm going to do that right now. So one of the things that's happening with the next book in the Custard Protocol series with Competence, which I promptly lost. Oh, there it is. Here we go. It's show and tell time, ladies and gentlemen. You're thinking of more questions for me, right? So here's Competence again. Pretty. So one of the things that is happening with this book is that the edition that's going to the UK is not going to have this cover. Now don't worry. It will have a it will have a very pretty cover. It will be similar colors, so you won't get confused, and it will be gorgeous because I'm doing it, or I'm hiring somebody to do it. And I have very good aesthetics, I think. Somebody was worried that that this would not, that the UK cover wouldn't match the other UK books, and I was like, I don't leave the house without my shoes matching my purse. Like, everything will match, don't worry. And to that end, we're going to talk about, so this cover will be appearing on this size book. So this is what the American book looks like when it is first released here in the United States and in Canada. It's a hardback book, so it has the, see, hardback. Yeah, it's this size. So this is what we would call hardback or hardcover. So when I'm talking about the hardcover editions, this is the kind of thing I am talking about. Now, the Parasol Protectorate books were not released in hardback. They were originally released in mass market paperback, which is that size. So see? Quite a bit smaller. This is the French edition, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, so mass market, I don't get really any of my books in English language printed in mass market anymore at all. They just stopped doing that for my books. I think partly because it seems like most of my readers who would have read the smallest size are now mostly reading digital, but I don't know the precise reasoning for that. But that was the size that all of the Parasol Protectorate books originally came out in. But since the Finishing School book, since my YA series, I've actually been released in hardback in the United States. Now, don't worry if you don't like hardback or if you don't like to collect hardback, then it will eventually come out in trade paperback in the United States. However, that's usually 8 months to a year after the hardback edition. So you have to wait if you want the trade paperback size. This is where it gets exciting. So, here is the United States trade paperback. So you see, right, it's floppy. However, it's basically the same print run as the hardback. So here they are together. You can see it's a little bit smaller, but essentially it's like the same layout and everything. And so it's relatively large for a paperback book. This is the United States version. However, then we have the UK. So the UK books are to the United Kingdom and Australia sometimes. Australia is difficult because you have to ship, and that's expensive. And then sometimes these are the English language books that you get in Europe, and sometimes it's the hardback American ones. It's kind of up to the bookstore what they're importing. The UK trade paperback size is smaller than the US trade paperback size. So here they all are. And don't worry, I have an image coming in the blog, but you can see. So this is the US hardback. Here is the US trade paperback, and here is the UK trade paperback. So it's smaller. In publishing, the publishing universe, this size is called B format. I don't know, there's some historical reason for that. So, yours truly took a poll of you guys, my darlings, when I was making my very first novella, and I asked you what size you would like that novella to be. And fortunately for me, you guys all really prefer the smaller size, like the UK. So, so all of my novellas, they're UK sized. Hooray! Isn't that great? Because it means I'm already equipped to print to that size. So, those of you who are in the UK or UK readers, or when you get the new Custard Protocol book, you get it in paperback. That's usually the biggest sign that you are getting the UK version. The other big sign is that the price on the back is in pounds. Anyway, you guys already are, I know how to do this size because that's the size I already print. So you're getting the right size. Don't worry about that. And you're going to get a beautiful cover. I just haven't announced it yet. It's gorgeous. Don't worry about that. So don't worry about anything. It will match as closely as humanly possible. And it will be the same size. It will be gorgeous. Everything will be fine. Now, but there will be 2 different covers. And what one of my friends said was, well, won't people want to collect both of them then? And I was like, oh, I genuinely didn't think of that. If you nefariously want to get the UK edition or the US edition, depending on which cover you like better or which style of book you like better, you probably can figure it out in this day and age of international shipping, etc. But I officially can't tell you how to do that. So you're on your own figuring it out. The whole reason for this is that I am technically only doing this book to the UK audience because I sold the rights to the US to my publisher. So they get to have the US, I get to try to have the UK, and ostensibly they're completely different. So other than that, there's no internal difference between the book's content. The ebook should be, I will be producing the ebook to the UK markets and the rest of the world, but it will be the same, baby. Everything internal to the book, the story is the same. There is one difference between the US and the UK editions. Again, here's your US hardback, here's your UK paper. The one difference is the word ladybug, because that's what it looks like in the UK. It's written ladybug. It's ladybird for the UK. Sorry, ladybug for the US, ladybird for the UK. So my goodness, that was our exciting, like, learn about the different sizes of book with Gail Carriger. Yes, the actual spelling and grammar and everything is British in both editions. It's anglicized. It always has been for the Custard Protocol books, because it turns out that you, my darling readers, really don't care. Thank you for not caring. And so I basically said, let's just go with British English. The only exception being that one word. And that's because Americans, when they read the word ladybird, just don't know what to do. And it throws them out of the story. It causes a great deal of confusion. And so my one codicil on the anglicization rule is that that one word not be touched, depending on its territory. So that's the only difference. Otherwise, internally, they will be exactly the same. So don't worry about that. So yeah, you've all got your book size education. Yeah, and I'm gonna post a photo of the different sizes and everything. It's way more obvious when you're kind of handling them and stuff that the sort of textures are slightly different on the different editions and stuff too. So now I'm going back and looking at some of your questions while I was giving you my show and tell. So Natalie wants to know why I'm self-publishing to the UK. I have a blog post coming up about that where I'm announcing the UK edition, but essentially I just decided to give it a try, basically. I was like, well, I have everything is set into place. Like, it's pretty seamless now when I produce a novella going out to the entire world, and I just wanted to see if I could do it, and you guys are my experiment. So, so far it's worked great. I wouldn't continue to do the novellas if you weren't buying them and excited about them. So, there's your short answer. I wanted to, and I can. Isn't that great? What a lovely position to be in. Thanks, you guys. It is really nice to be able to pick up and write characters that I adore and, you know, give them different lengths of stories and experiment with different kinds and styles of stories without being, you know, beholden to the traditional model. And I can do that because you support me. So thanks, guys. Like, a lot. It's really wonderful. Mari would like to know how much research I end up having to do for each book. So my general feeling is it's a time thing, and basically I tend to do about as much research as I do actually physically writing. So for every hour that I'm writing on a book, I'm spending an hour researching that book. it's not always the case, but it's about that. So I think of it in terms of time allotment. It would be hard for me to think, you know, sometimes I'll have to read an entire nonfiction book because I'm writing something, you know, and sometimes it's, as I'm writing, it's broken up by me like tunneling into, what was going on in Italy in 1876? I have no idea. The social structure, you know, like, well, off she goes. And then, you know, 5 hours later and 8 wiki articles, I'm back. So it really does depend on the book, but for me, as a general rule of thumb, it's 1 hour writing is going to be 1 hour researching. In the raw process. My writing process is a lot of editing. I'm a heavy edit writer. I like to be edited, and I like to edit myself. I do several revisions before I send my book off to anybody. So the actual raw writing process is not necessarily the longest part of my process as a writer. But it is that raw writing is also researching. And I don't backfill research. Some authors will do all of their research first and then start writing the rough draft, and I don't do that. I do something called TK, which is to come in writer lingo, and TK, the two letters together don't exist in the English language, so it's really searchable. So if I'm on a flow with a scene and I'm really doing well, I will put T and K together just in the middle of a paragraph. When I know I have to go research something, like did the word tiddlywinks exist, I'll just put TK. And then I'll keep writing until I'm done with the scene. And then I will do my research. So I don't like interrupt my writing flow to do research, but it is part of that process. So, and sometimes I will stop writing for the day and then do the TKs for that last scene because I kind of want to still work the scene a little bit. And sometimes I'll leave the TK until the very end of the novel and then do them all you know, in a couple of weeks after I finish the rough draft. It kind of just depends. But I do always have to do a TK hunt because I often sort of seed them for myself. It's another time when future Gail is cursing past Gail for past Gail's laziness. Emma would like to know, if I could have a meal with 2 of my characters, which ones and which meal? Definitely Lord Akldama would be in there because I just think he would be a wonderful conversationalist. Maybe Madame LeFou as well. Kind of, I have a little bit of a crush on Madame LeFou, so I think the 2 of them would be really fun. Maybe Teshret. Teshret would be great to have a meal with. What about Teshret and Lord Akldama? Couple of immortals. Oh, I bet they had stories to tell. And which meal? I don't know. Maybe I haven't written that meal yet. We all know that they wouldn't be eating very much, or Teshret would be eating a lot of raw stuff, and Lord Akldama would be swilling a lot of pink fizzies, but pink slurps. I would probably have to eat whatever was served to be, and it would probably be quite British and gruelingly Victorian. So maybe I would just do tea with those 2. Jessa wants to know if I get any say with the translators. None whatsoever. I have no say in who's translating my books or how they're translated. I usually don't even know when they're releasing in a foreign country. It's often a complete surprise to me when I have a release, you know, in Portugal or Germany or something. And sometimes it will be a year before I even know. Like Germany brought out hardcover editions of the Parasol Protectorate, and I didn't know for like 2 years until someone sent me a picture. And I was like, oh, I guess I have hardcover in Germany. Yeah, it's really weird how little I know about what goes on with my foreign books. And I shouldn't have a say in the translations because, frankly, I don't speak any, or I speak a little bit of Spanish, but I certainly don't read any foreign languages. So I wouldn't even know whether it was good or not. Yeah, foreign translation is entirely handled by the publishing house that acquired the books. And it's also an incredibly expensive process. That is one of the reasons that I haven't translated any of the novellas into any foreign languages, because it's really very costly, and I wouldn't be able to vet whether it was a good translation or not. At least when I'm hiring somebody to do an audiobook, I can listen to it and see if they're doing a good job. With translation, I don't speak the language, so I wouldn't know if it was a good job, and that's another reason I've kind of been hesitant. And then the third reason, of course, is that I wouldn't know how to write the marketing copy, like the proof, my bio, I couldn't write anything because I don't write in any other languages. So yeah, fortunately for me, for my traditionally published books, it's all done by somebody else. And I just have to keep my fingers crossed that I do a good job. Whenever I travel overseas, that's actually one of the questions I always ask. Is this translation good? Did you like the translation? It's a real concern when you write humor in particular, because humor is so very specific to culture often. It is one of the reasons that I put such a range of humor in my books, or I try to. So there's certain kinds of humor that are cross-cultural, like slapstick. So Heartless, for example, is particularly popular in places like Japan because it has a lot of slapstick humor in it. Whereas there's other kinds of humor that obviously don't translate, like wordplay, because the words are different. So translation I don't envy people who do translation. It's very, very challenging. Annie wants to know, in Competence, is Primrose Parasol primrose color? Yes, it is. Yes, for those who missed it. I don't think it's intentional, but yeah, Primrose's parasol that she's holding there is in fact primrose colored, which makes me very happy. Kate wants to know if you get Soap and Sophronia's secret missions. You certainly get peeks at them doing their thing. So, sort of. But they're very secretive. So am I. Amber wants to know mine, I'm assuming, favorite musical, opera, ballet, play. Well, I again, this is a little bit like the Pride and Prejudice question, but I do love Carmen if we're talking operas. I'm not a huge opera aficionado, but one of my best friends in university was an operatic tenor. And so I used to go to his performances to support him. And I just remember falling in love with Carmen quite a bit. So yeah, I really am a fan of modern ballet. There's a company called Lines, which I really, really enjoy. I like to see like traditional things like ballet music and operas redone. In terms of musicals, it's a really hard question. I grew up with musicals, so I love them. I don't know, like I could list a ton of them. I'm a traditionalist, so old school musicals in particular. I'm a huge fan of Miss Saigon, which I know is quite tragic, but and certainly has its flaws, but is a beautiful production if you can see it. And then I also have really liked some of the sort of like weirder, more quirky ones, like Annie Get Your Gun, that kind of thing. So. Yeah, I should add at this juncture that I am a terrible singer. Occasionally authors will get together and do things like karaoke, and I'm always like, I'll be in the background as your interpretive dance or your backup dancer, but nobody wants to hear me sing. Trust me. Amy says she buys the physical books for her collection. Thank you very much. I appreciate your support, but also the Kindle editions. So that's great. Like, yeah, thank you. You gave me a career by doing that kind of thing. I don't know, Amy, if you had a question in there because I can only read a couple lines the way Facebook Live is set up. So if there was a question, just ask the question in a separate comment, please, and I will get to it. Oh, I see. There's a bit of a discussion going on the preference between physical books and electronic books. I personally think there's something to be said for both. This day and age, do tend to consume most of my fiction electronically, though. Although I have encountered some problems with that. It's just because I travel so much. The fact that I can have thousands of books with me at any one time and I can pick up and read anything I feel like has outweighed every other concern in terms of reading for fun and reading for pleasure. So I have become a digital reader. I swore I never would, but that many hours on planes, you guys, and I've learned to love my e-reader. Everybody is discussing the different sizes. Annie wants to know which size book I like to read best. Ooh, I love that question. Thank you, Annie. My preferred size of book is actually mass market paperback, which is sadly the one size that I'm not printed in anymore. So there you go. Typical. I have a very strange reason for this, which is I inherited a set of mahogany shelves from my grandmother. And the shelves are very short, so the only size that really fits on the shelves is mass market paperback size. So that's why I like it. And then the other reason is I have and I struggle with carpal tunnel and repetitive stress and like all the sorts of aches and pains of the wrist and hand that any chronic typer or writer or computer programmer gets. And yes, I'm always working on my stretches and doing things to combat it, but it does mean that a smaller book is more appealing to me. So like, it's just easier on my wrists. So the hardbacks are actually just hurt to hold after a little while. I understand the benefit of the hardback in terms of the quality, and they keep forever and they look beautiful. But I have a special place in my heart for mass market. I think that also has to do with the fact that when I was first reading genre, it was always printed in mass market because it wasn't considered important enough to get a hardback. So all of my favorite early books are mass market paperbacks. Some of them very worn and wrinkled and dropped into the bathtub, but I still have them. Still have a little collection of my mass markets that are out of print, and I'm waiting patiently. I'm hoping that eventually we get a digital edition, and then I will rebuy them. And then I have a few hardbacks, young adult hardbacks that have always been brought out, or usually are brought out in hardcover first. But yeah, my favorite edition to read is a mass market, which I don't get anymore. So irony. Aisling wants to know if I base my characters off of people I know. Well, not if you talk to the people I know. But yes, I like to say that many of people's favorite characters are based off of my best friends when they're drunk. Ivy, in fact, is one of my best friends in the whole wide world when she's drunk. And when I was writing Ivy regularly, I would occasionally turn up at said friend's house with a bottle of red wine and be like, I have an Ivy scene coming up. It's time for you to drink. So, yeah, sometimes pretty shamelessly based on people I know and love. Sometimes my characters are amalgams of people. Like one of my other best friends turns to me at one point and says, I'm very upset that you've never put me into your books. And I was basically like, of course I've put you into my books. She was like, no. I was like, I just changed your gender around. And then she's like, oh! So, yeah, so I do that. And then occasionally my friends will sneak into my books whether I like it or not. I've told this story before, but I do remember one of my reader friends coming up to me and saying, hey, what's Paul doing in your book? And I was like, I didn't put Paul in my book. And she said, yeah, you did. He's just red-headed and wears really tight pants. And I was like, oh! I did put Paul in my book. Fortunately for me, my friends, like Paul, are the kind of person who, as Paul did, will then go, bleach his hair, dye it red, and portray Tunstall at a book launch party. So I have the kind of friends that are pretty, like, easygoing, will even cosplay themselves in their alternate appearances. So it all works out well in the end. Yeah, so sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally. I think almost every writer, like, bits of yourself and bits of your friends and bits of people you love or hate or know always kind of leak into your books. It's practically impossible to get away from. Ooh, Dex has a really interesting question. Wants to know when I'm satisfied enough with my own writing before sending it in. Usually, because I'm a perfectionist, I'm never satisfied enough. But I've learned to, the saying I like to say is, the perfect is the enemy of the done. And I have to be done because you guys want to read the next book. And if I were left to my own devices, I would rewrite the book a bazillion times. It would never see readers. So I have to stop myself. And my hard stop is 6 drafts. And every time I read through the whole manuscript, I give it a new draft number. And after 6 drafts, it has to be sent away. That's my rule. So my rough draft is always done in Scrivener. I love Scrivener. I'm a Scrivener writer. I made that switch several years ago and I've never looked back. And then I tend to do then I convert it into Word or OpenOffice or Libre. And then I will do another read through in a different digital form. And I actually catch a lot that way. That's actually pretty helpful for me. So that's my first draft. Then I do a second read through. That's my second draft. And then I will do an audio read through. In other words, I'll read the whole thing out loud to hear how my intonation sounds in my own head. And that's the third draft. And this day and age, because I'm getting old hat at this now, that's usually when I send it off to a developmental editor. Or I have a deadline from my publisher. So I have to send it out. So even if I like to do a couple more reads, tinker a little bit more, I'm just not allowed to. It has to go off because it's due. But left to my druthers, I think now it would be about six passes or revisions. But I don't usually get to do that many anymore. And I'm learning to be okay with that. Generally speaking, if it's a genre that I'm getting into for the first time or I'm a little nervous about, so like the Souvenir Solution had a few more passes because I'd never written a book like that before. And this nascent sci-fi that I'm kind of percolating in the back of my head, that one will probably get multiple passes because I'm just a little bit nervous about it. But yeah, but the perfect, you guys, is your enemy when you're a writer, I think. Because I think a lot of writers are perfectionists, and we've got to learn to let go and put it out into the world, or it never gets out into the world, or you never finish. And those are your real enemies. That's where we suffer. Jessa says that my French translation is good, which I'm very grateful to hear. Sylvie and I have met, and she's wonderful, so I'm delighted that her translation is good. That is the fun thing about traveling as an author, is I've gotten to meet a couple of my translators. I still don't know sometimes when the translations are occurring, but I have gotten to meet some of the translators. And once I've met them, they're usually a little bit more comfortable about approaching me. So Sylvie has asked me a couple of questions, like translation questions, like especially when I've made up a word or when there's a wordplay thing. And she's like, I know this is funny, but I'm not entirely sure how to translate it. And my Japanese translator will actually contact me quite often, which is really fun for me because it's kind of an adventure to explain your books to someone who's not a native English speaker. Especially from such a different culture. I find myself drawing on sort of samurai class systems, medieval Japan, when I'm trying to explain the British class systems to my Japanese translator. So it's really fun. Sometimes I'll do hilarious blog posts about me talking with some of my translators because the questions they ask me are just, like, it would never occur to me to be asked. So yeah, you can Google Gail Carriger in translation. Strangeness. More people are watching. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to have you all. Sally is saying that one of the advantages of digital is it is hard to go back and find something that happened, especially if you're a pattern recognition reader. So I do feel you on that one. I have noticed a couple of problems since I became a digital reader, which is my retention of author names and titles is a lot worse because I'm never shutting the book and seeing the title anymore, or the author, like the author name is not appearing on the top of the page constantly. So I will fall in love with the book and I will want to recommend it to people and I have no idea who wrote it or what its title was. So that is a problem with digital. The other problem I find with digital is, like Sally says, is I can't find a good bit that I want to go back and reread or go back and check on because I'm a pattern person. So I'll be like, oh, that was about, you know, that far into the book was that scene that I want to go back to. So yeah, so I get what you mean. There are ups and downs to both forms of reading, I think. It's really what you're willing to sacrifice now, I suppose. Ursula says she likes my Kindle deal. Thank you so much. For those of you who follow my Facebook page, I will recommend like books that I love that come up on sale because I want to sucker you into trying out the series. It's one of the things I do on my page quite a bit, and I'm delighted that you like them. I'm assuming that if you read my books that we must have a similar taste in reads, although it's not always the case. But I try to like if I see a book that I love come up on sale, I try to be like, give it a try, you guys, because it's great. But they do tend to be ebooks because that's what I'm looking for to add to my collection or to renew my collection. So that's why I'm always posting those. Amy wants to know, are there any new finishing novellas? Yes, I did answer that one earlier, but really quickly, there will be a new Delightfully Deadly book next year, definitely, because I finally came up with the epiphany moment for that book. I'm not going to tell you yet who the main character is, but I think you'll be very pleased, and I'm pretty excited about the book. I was just waiting for that, oh, that's what that one has to be. And I finally had that moment for the next Delightfully Deadly. So definitely you are getting it as soon as I write it. It's on the docket after I finish the Custard Protocol series. So that's the next book I'm writing. And then after that, I hope to write the Delightfully Deadly book. Assuming this sci-fi thing doesn't mess with my head more. You never know. And there's always the possibility of another contract, I suppose. But I intend to write the next Delightfully Deadly. Somebody has noticed that Piper bopped on. Hi, Piper. Piper is my co-host on the podcast 20 Minute Delay. So, Venn diagram! Doo-doo! Yay! Gail, Ursula wants to know if I would do any collaborations with other writers. This is a secret project I am not talking about. But it's really good, you guys, and I cannot wait to announce it. So... that was really mean. I'm sorry. I really shouldn't do that. But just you wait. I have a collaboration coming up that I'm really excited about. In terms of co-authoring things, that is, I am thinking about doing it, but I am less likely to do that. But there is a collaboration coming up that I think is going to knock your socks off. I'm so excited about it. Yeah, Annie is saying that it's really difficult to look back at maps and guides in digital, and I totally agree with that. I am not a big epic fantasy reader, so I tend to not read books that have a lot of maps in them, but those times when I did in the past, I did love having that map to reference, and you're right, in digital, it's really a pain to deal with. Brittany asks, what is my favorite souvenir to get while traveling? Ooh, what a great question. Piper, we should do this on 20 Minute Delay. No more questions. Speaking of which, no more questions, you guys, because we're running out of time and I'm running out of battery, so I'm gonna have to close the live down. But Brittany, to answer your question, my favorite thing to collect is jewelry and scarves. I like to collect smaller things when I'm traveling for packing reasons, and those are two things that I think will give me a great memory of a place and are like powerful tools for remembering a beautiful travel experience, but in a very small way. So yeah, scarves are really a big one. I love a really pretty little scarf. So, and do these make this into my books? No, but the places I travel often make it into my book. Competence opens in Singapore because I was recently in Singapore, and I might have accidentally promised a major politician in a totalitarian government that I would put Singapore into my next book. So I did. Because, yeah, I might have also accidentally made fun of it because I make fun of everything. So I hope I don't get into trouble. Any last questions? Jojo says, love the novels. Thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you for the compliment. So thank you for saying nice things, everybody. That's always wonderful to hear, even if it's not a question. And I think on that note, it's like 15 minutes past, so this live has gone long, but I hope you enjoyed the, the size of book analysis game with Gail Carriger. And yes, some quick reminders before we go. Romancing the Werewolf came out. If you wanted Biffy and Lyle's story, you got it. So there it is. The next one is going to be How to Marry a Werewolf, which is Channing's story. Then we're going to have Competence, the new Custard Protocol book. You guys saw the cover for that. Very exciting. See if I can show you that again. there it is, one last time. Competence is coming. And then the last book for 2018 is going to be the follow-up to the Zoom Age Solution. It's called The Omega Objection, which is Tank's story. So that's exciting. And then the last thing, just a reminder, the hardback editions of the Finishing School books are going out of print. So if you, speaking of our love of different editions of books, if you are a hardcover collector and that's what you want, then pick them up before they're not available anymore. They're not going out of print. The books are still available in paperback form, but the hardcover editions are going out of print. So that's it, my darlings. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I promise there'll be another live soon, probably in a month, next March. And until then, drink the tea and stay happy, okay? Bye, guys.